All right. So our first reader today is L. Ward Abel. His work has appeared in hundreds of journals, and he is the author of 3 full collections and 10 chapbooks of poetry, including his latest collection, The Width of Here, Silver Bow, 2021. He is a reformed lawyer. He writes and plays music, and he teaches literature. Abel resides in rural Georgia. So, Ward, I invite you to begin reading.
And I appreciate it so very much to have the opportunity to be with you guys this evening. And, it's a real honor, I can say that. I thought I would read from mainly my latest collection, and if there's time, I will certainly continue on. I have another recent collection that has some pretty good things in it. We'll begin from The Width of Here. The first poem I'll read you is called Your Breathing. Thank you. Your breathing. Here, leaning in to get a better view, I think while sunning full-faced, there's poignance in my brevity. Truth shows up. The metal's edge makes the cicatrice of a once clean place. Geography rises, then breathes out. Perfume on my hands, Arabian, can't distract from the tattoo that is my room. I join your breathing. It teems, it crowds. I'll next read from one entitled Breaks, and it's one that, well, all of these are my children, obviously, but this one seems to reflect what many people have to deal with, and that is things like depression and anxiety. Many of us probably share that affliction, but it sometimes can help a poet, and yet sometimes it can hurt a poet. And so this is called Breaks. You'll notice the gap in my journal. It approaches 6 weeks, even longer. You'll wonder why the writing basically stopped, scattered, awoke in time for later. There may be other questions about shadows and space and curtains that didn't move, even with windows cracked or open. Later, you will disregard the gap altogether and return to your life, your own mood. You'll notice the gap in my journal. It approaches 6 weeks, even longer. I wonder why the writing basically stopped, scattered, awoke in time for later. There may be other questions about shadows and space and curtains that didn't move, even with windows cracked or opened. Later, you will disregard the gap altogether and return to your life, to your own moments of darkness and light. But the break in my journal will still be here, still with an open, quiet mouth. Living out in somewhat rural Georgia, I know that my bio says rural Georgia, but less and less so as time moves on. Atlanta is exploding, has been for many years, really since the Olympics in '96. But there's still cattle around me and woods and things like that, and a deer across the property. So much of my inspiration comes from the land. And here's an example. It's called These Winter Fields. A dank passage cuts through a cedared gate, and I'm in the winter fields. No blue like blue above, where foothills stand up against much older seas, only beaches left behind and a gathering of sand and greenery south of here. The brevity of change that never ends. It shows in the crows too, perched on the branches of my lungs. And if all this were to become unfamiliar, no landmarks to get me home, just folds where other people's houses dot the wheel, I'd shelter in place. It's a red cedar gate, I think. Small knives that belie their being green. Here's one called All Our Living. One of those big picture poems, I suppose. There's a jumping between trees, a slight elevation, luring wings across, along, among. A refusal to cede, a greening back to gray becomes part of me. Catching my breath just after pneumonia, I glide. I see the air. The sky holds all of our living, holds me and my chatter, holds you. Another little painting, and I'm a wannabe painter that happens to have a pen, I suppose, because I wish I could paint. Another scene from the field, so to speak. It's called Crow Song. A glass door opens and scares 4 or 5 like him, swarms that had been a pack. While others reform, one flies alone slowly along those night green walls. In the road round a corner, he scatters to and from a smear, waiting to bake. He has doll eyes. They blink a language, utterly means to an end. A glare formed, reforming, reactive, on watch and not. Life in the wake of cars. Near the graveyard, he competes with yellow butterflies. They dance, endorse, convoy down the country's summer fade, call, respond, all near an old primitive church. Pines and green canal rights of way roll down from there to where he'll cross over those rows. Sometimes he and the blues will fuss, go silent, fuss again, then conjure burning fields, divide the world into parcels of black-winged clash and long frayed oaths, while the Irish harp, or the other one, wails a river-bottom gale, a crow song, a waterspout, swollen little hurricane. No wonder he mistakes sunrise for sunset, huddles on skeleton oaks ragged with ivy. But he'll catch the first and last from up there. His feathers, like film, will peel the layers, show the daylight, all we ever have. This is one that finishes out the width of here, the one that is my most recent collection on Silverbow. And it is about I guess you'd call it a metaphorical conversation with the great painter Mark Rothko. I'm a big fan of his colors, and I imagined a conversation with him. As a matter of fact, the collection begins with a quote from Rothko. It's called "Silence is so accurate," and that is so true, obviously. But this one's called "Conversation with Rothko," and I break it into different colors. Red. The world is not a kind world. It's best to realize this. Red doesn't occur in nature. We seek it through our fear of red. Colors are ghosts of bone houses, gone now to seed. Blue. The opposite of windows is the open air. Darkness in the foreground, brings alive the western skies, and wind can give texture to things that cannot, will not move. Green. I had wished to hold a moment, an aerial view of the counties. Death is peace, water flows uphill, and clocks aren't vaned. We can count to nothing and start again, or else become the leaves that we are. Black. A magnet for vision draws in all eyes and itself and sings. One is none is everything, but even light can't escape. Unsex the sunset, take it to the perfect night of prayer. White. Painters have nothing to say anymore. They flood the intersection with bright, bright light, play God, make holy the vacant. I walk out of the chapel into a glaring absence. Yellow. There is no yellow in point of fact. It's only suggested by an empty width out before us. Don't offer heat to the cold morning. Add nothing. Remain. Stop your painting. But we aren't at home here. Otherwise, we would just breathe. And here we have one called Halo, which is, as usual, is a bit of painting on my part. I hope you like the painting. Halo. This butterfly in a moment of showers, a devil beats his wife, seeks the magnolia sheen, a siren, a bloom, like a lighthouse. She treads the smaller thermals, part of a halo encircling all trees. Le papillon, she dries what beads remain with brightness, a self-made fan. But then again, her torn sky bleeding blue into fields, a bruise the size of weather, sheet flows, and she finds shelter, overgrown there, yellow, black, wet, at rest. And I'll go to my next collection. It's called Floodlit. It's by it's published by a Frenchman who thought enough to publish it. And the collection is called Floodlit, and this song is called Chopin at the Edge of a Field. There he is again, Chopin at the edge of a field where the tree line begins. It can't rain, but does, and alone. And in that counterclockwise raining is a storm of doves at 30 hertz. Thunder 88 keys wide, its radar a scar of deep reds, yellow. Then finally that tree line marking the squall. His music bespeaks a night song, a wideness seriously away and twice removed away. Here's one of the many that I wrote while I was down at my grandmother's old house in Fort Myers, Florida, almost to the complete bottom of the continental U.S. And it's a seeking of peace. It's called Mornings at My Angkor Wat. Few places won't yield to sky, but these wide, massive stands confront almost any godhead. The interior has little solid floor unless you count canopies giving way to great leas. Sometimes a dry season patch can expose a 30-mile view. Still, what hard vantage the night gives, even out here aglow. I'd like to cut the feed, to shut down the juice, and just be. Hold up for good, mornings at my anchor watt, would make a home here along the seldom roads where I've charged for admission to myself, so I can pay me back all the things I've lost. And I have a couple more. Thank you so much. A couple more here. I don't know about you guys, but I have a very noisy head. There's always noise in this old head of mine. Whether, yes, I see Robert agrees. Whether it be music or whatever. And here's a fairly good example of what that noisy head can sound like. It's called breathing through planks. Wind, yes, the songs of wood and walls and cypress swamp, the lungs breathe through planks so hard as to cast off nails that try to pierce countless coats of red, then white, then brown, then forest green, sloped away from the rest of the house. For when rainy seasons hit again, when the clouds need somewhere to go, sound with artifacts, with layers below street level, between words and memory, where notes, letters end, where there's quiet in this noisy head. Thank you. And I will finish with a short little piece. I think it's about procreation. It's called Water Lily. She walks through the grove under high ceilings. It rains and augments change, clings like a sweet onion bloom. She fixes eyes on the narrator. The source of children sways, backlit, immersed by intinction, eternal. Thank you.
Oh, Ward, that was lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Speaking of noisy heads, my head was so noisy. I'm really grateful that we're filming this because I can go back and pay more careful attention to your beautiful words.
Well,
so,
you're the director and the producer, so you have many things going on.
Yeah. Everybody can unmute themselves now for a few minutes if they like. I would really like you to, interact with Ward. This is a good opportunity, either just to tell him what you thought of his reading or to ask him questions. So Herb here says, good reading, Ward. There have been some lovely comments on the chat.
Oh, I'll make sure I check those out too.
Yeah. So anybody else want to?
Oh,
good, Bonnie.
Ward, thank you. That was beautiful. And I feel like your work is almost, you were saying you wish you were a painter. As you said, your work is, it's almost like you were giving us paintings, and it seems so full of color. And I just wanted to know if you could speak to that aspect of your work, the color in it, and if you relate that to painting or to, just where it comes from.
Well, my inspirations all come from these scenes, I guess you'd say. I'm very visual, of course, and the images, I guess you would say, that I see, I really, really wish I could paint. I really do. And I don't know if is Candace here with us tonight, Kara?
No, I expected her, but she hasn't shown up yet. So,
well,
yeah.
She is such a wonderful painter, as all of us know. And my brother is a very good painter as well, but never have been able to do that. So the imagery is so important to convey whatever it is
Mhm.
that I'm trying to convey. And I appreciate you seeing the colors, because there's a vividness in my mind when I write these that I hope, and I really do hope that it all comes through. So Bonnie, thank you for noticing that.
It
In
really,
fact, I
I
think-
just wanted to say it really does come through. So thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie.
And I think Heidi Greco, who's here today, mentioned something similar to what Bonnie said about your painting, your poetry being paintings of sort, right? Feeding us the image.
Absolutely, absolutely.
there you
They're so visual. I feel as though I'm looking out on the landscape where you are, and
Mhm.
hearing that one of the pieces was inspired by being in Fort Myers, the land of the manatee.
Yes.
Yeah, what a delight to be able to reach across the continent like this. Thank you, Ward.
Thank you, Heidi.
Janet says online here that you are an artist.
Thank you, Janet.
And I think from the reaction I'm seeing on people's faces that everybody agrees with that, Ward. I would just have a quick question, and I'd like to ask, and I may have asked it another time, I can't remember. How did you come to love poetry? How did that happen in your life?
It's very hard to say. I probably started writing poetry around the age of 13, almost 50 years ago, rather. And it coincided with when I started writing music and lyrics.
Mhm.
And I see music and poetry to be interchangeable. I think in today's culture, it becomes even more obvious that is the case. I think going back to the Anglo-Saxons, putting my little teacher's hat on, Saxons with the scops and the storytellers. I think it's all music. And so it all happened kind of at the same time. I put down my poetic hat for a little while and focused on writing music and songs and lyrics for many, many years, starting back really writing seriously with my poetry about 22 or so years ago. And I think it probably coincided roughly with 9/11 and that time period. Ultimately, it became something that I do almost every day. And I enjoy, by the way, I enjoy editing just as much as writing. As a matter of fact, I'll just throw something down and come back to it. And that's when I think the creative juices oftentimes are at their strongest. Yeah, it's just been a lifelong thing with me. And, I truly love to do it. Even though it's an obscure art form, I realize that. That's irrelevant to me. It's something that is very important in my life.
Well, I think that certainly comes through in your work. Go ahead, Bonnie.
Oh, I was just going to say, at one point you said, "Oh, and here's another song," and I thought you were about to burst into song. Oh,
Yes.
great!
Don't get me started.
Oh my gosh, that's right.